Souls-likes are one of my favorite genres of all time, and this year we were seeing not one, but two major releases, which is always a scary thing because a lot of them just aren't that good. One of these games is Lies of P, and the other is a reboot of Lords of the Fallen, a game that is infamous for being the first major non-FromSoft Souls-like, and also for being terrible. Their reveal trailers, however, were looking pretty solid and seemed to have a bit of potential, with Lies of P's Bloodborne-like aesthetic mixed with Sekiro parries, and Lords of the Fallen's more normal Dark Souls aesthetic with this really cool split world mechanic that looked like it could add a lot to the world. I have now played and finished both of these games, and I can safely say this. Lies of P is a masterpiece and easily stands among FromSoft's best titles, while Lords of the Fallen is probably the most annoying game that I have played this year. I haven't uploaded in a bit, and since I never made a video about Lies of P because, well, I was playing Lies of P, I thought it would be best to compare these two and show why Lies of P worked so well for me and why Lords of the Fallen didn't work at all. It's not to say that Lords of the Fallen failed at doing everything it set out to do, because there are a lot of good things in this game, and some people will like it a lot, but there's also a lot of bad stuff, and a lot of really bad stuff. I hate this game. But the worst part of all is that Lords of Fallen, even at its best, never felt fun to play and felt more annoying than anything. Well, before we get into the negatives, let's start with some positives first by comparing how the loot works. Both of these games offer a huge list of weapons and great looking gear, so you'll definitely be able to make a lot of builds in both of these games, but let's just start out with Lords of the Fallen. This game has a massive amount of items, and I felt like I was getting something new basically every single minute. I started the game with a dex build and cycled through daggers to a spear to two daggers to two spears, but I finally settled on a nice straight sword that has a solid moveset when used two-handed, and it basically carried me throughout the entire game. This game has great variety to the builds, and even though I personally never use most of the weapons in the game, if I were to go on Twitch or YouTube and watch somebody else play the game, chances are that they're going to be using a completely different build than the next person down the list, or whatever I used. 194 weapons, 76 spells, and 339 armor pieces means that there will be a lot of cool builds that people will make down the line. And sure, a lot of the armor weapons may be similar, but it's still cool that there are this many items, and in turn, it makes the true endgame fashion Souls, which is always awesome. Now, when compared to Lords of the Fallen, Lies of P has significantly less weapons and armor overall. The game has around 40 total weapons in the game and about 30 costumes and accessories to equip, with the costumes and accessories not really having any stats at all, and they're strictly for fashion. This game makes up for the lack of weapons in some ways, such as the throwable consumables, which are very strong, and the Legion Arm, which you can change depending on your playstyle. In my first run, I mainly used the Puppet String, which has an extremely satisfying attack that is really strong when you fully upgrade it, but I also used the gun and the Aegis Shield, both of which are very strong, with the shield... Actually, like, I just finished my New Game Plus 3 run, the shield is busted. The main mechanic that makes up for the lack of weapons, however, is that there are a lot of options for you to use due to the game's weapon modding system. Say you get a knife with a really nice elemental attack that you really like, but you don't like it because the range is too small. Well, that doesn't matter because you can take the knife handle off and completely replace it with a weapon with a larger handle, such as a spear, and make up for that lack of range. Or you can replace the knife blade with something like a wrench head if you like the knife's moveset, but you want something harder hitting to it and don't really care about the status effect. I messed around with the customization system quite a bit and created some really stupid weapons in all my playthroughs, and it was really cool because a certain weapon might not be good on its own, but by customizing you can create one of the strongest weapons in the game, or create something that is perfect for your playstyle. While Lords of the Fallen goes for the Elden Ring approach, where there is a metric fuck ton of items, which is always awesome, Lies of P does something new for the genre and made something that I really hope to see in future titles. But with that said, both games have a great loot system, and both of them pop off in this aspect. Another positive aspect of both games is their world and art styles. When it comes to world design and how everything looks, I think both Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen excel in making a world that fits the theme of the game and looks really good as well in the process. There will be spoilers for the games from here on out, so this is your warning. Lies of P takes place in a city called Krat, and it has this awesome steampunk mixed with Bloodborne aesthetic to it, and the variety in the world was really nice as well. Going from the main streets of Krat to the main hub zone Hotel Krat, into the slums, into a massive infected castle, the game constantly moves you to new places, keeping the variety up in both new areas and new enemies. The enemy variety in this game is so good, in that you will see 3 to 4 new enemy types in each new area throughout the game. From Robocops to infected humans to creepy clowns to the devil himself, this variety constantly kept you on your toes because you could be fighting infected monsters one moment and the next get attacked by one of the most aggressive mobs I have ever seen in a Souls game. Oh, shit. Alongside the amazing world of the game, you also have some pretty good lore and personally my favorite story in a Souls game. Lies of P is obviously a twist on the original Pinocchio story, so you know some things to expect, but it's the little twists and turns throughout that really kept me engaged in the game's story, unlike a lot of other Souls-likes. If you are turned off by the usual approach in Souls-like storytelling, which is very mysterious and not that direct, I think you will appreciate this game's storytelling a lot more. I didn't really expect much from this game's story, but it's seriously really good, and there is some great character development, and I just have to gush about this because it is actually genius. But since you play as Pinocchio, you obviously have the ability to lie, and this mechanic plays directly into the main story throughout the game and can also be used to further push side quests in a new direction. For example, in this quest you meet a mother that has the petrification disease, which is the sickness that is infecting all of Krat in this game. She is slowly dying and has already lost her sight, and she asks you to find her baby that went missing. If you choose to do this quest, you will stumble upon a pile of dead bodies, which you can assume the baby is among them, but you also find a baby doll to the side of the pile of the bodies. You can choose to give her this doll and lie to her, telling her that this is her baby and that it's beautiful. And she will thank you since she thinks she has been reunited with her child, putting her at peace, and she rewards you with one of the best songs in the game. What this also does is make you gain humanity after every lie. Since puppets in this world cannot lie, you are slowly becoming a real boy as you play the game. At the start of the game, you are a full-blown puppet, but if you make the correct decisions throughout the game, you start becoming human, and you see this directly by Pinocchio growing his hair, and you also start making sounds when you attack or get hit, and you start breathing normally. It's something really subtle other than the hair growth, and the moment that I really picked up on it was in the hotel. There is a cat named Spring, and at the beginning of the game when you are a puppet, this cat fucking despises you, and refuses to let you touch it. But the more you lie, the more you become human, and the more the cat starts to trust you, and you're rewarded with a really great scene when you become full humanity. There are other ways of feeling more human that you can utilize throughout the game, such as using emotes in certain spots, or you can fully listen to songs at the record player in Hotel Krat. These songs are seriously incredible, and quickly became some of my favorite songs in the genre. Playing one of the songs that you get from Antonia while finally completing her quest actually made me feel sad, which is something that I've never really felt before playing a Souls-like. Sure, I can watch a Vati video about Dark Souls lore and get sad, but while playing those games, I don't understand half of what's going on while actually going through them the first time, so I don't really get as attached like I did in this game, since this game's story is a lot more digestible. In my opinion, Lies of P nailed everything about what makes a Souls-like world and lore good, and I don't think I've ever been this immersed in a Souls game since playing Bloodborne. While not hitting as hard for me, Lords of the Fallen's world is also really cool, although I do have a few issues with it. Lords of the Fallen's best feature is absolutely, without a doubt, its world and art design. This game is fucking disgusting in the best way possible. This game's art direction had one goal, and that was to be a very grimdark, disgusting fantasy world, and it absolutely nailed it in every single way possible. The only thing that I wanted more of was for the game to have a little bit more color instead of mainly the blues and grays that you'll see throughout like 90% of the game. But like I said, the game's world works perfectly for what the game is. There's also this really cool mechanic with the game having a split world, so you can explore in the normal one and also the Umbral one, which has a ton of secrets in it. And it always looked great and was really cool at first, but unfortunately it got quite frustrating as the game went on, which I'll get into in a minute. Another really nice thing about this world is how it is all connected, similar to how the original Dark Souls was, which was nice to see. Now, when it comes to what is actually in the world is where Lords of the Fallen falls apart big time. One of the biggest issues with this game's world is the enemy variety, or lack thereof. This game has one of the weakest enemy varieties I have ever seen in a AAA Souls-like, but I think the worst part is it's just not fun to fight most of the enemies. It also doesn't help that this game thinks difficulty equals adding more enemies, because holy shit, it felt like you were fighting 10 plus enemies at any given time, especially if you were in the Umbral world. Throughout my entire playthrough, I think I encountered around 20 normal enemies, and that's not counting asset swaps. And this game had a really fucking stupid thing where most of the bosses in this game just end up becoming normal enemies that you see a million times after you beat them. And the not fun to fight part comes from the fact that a lot of the enemies in this game just spam projectiles at you from across the map, which is so infuriating because these dudes just snipe you. Like, you can't even see them half the time and you're getting sniped, and every single time you get hit, you completely stop, which opens you up to an attack from one of the 50,000 people chasing you. Comparing this to Lies of P, which had plenty of enemy variety, it felt like I was running into the same exact enemies that I saw at the beginning of the game, even at the end of the game. Another thing that I really didn't like about Lords of the Fallen is the level design. Since the game is very muted and everything looks gross, kind of like Scorn, which came out last year, it became really easy to get lost since literally everything looked the exact same. And it doesn't help that some paths are only found in the Umbral world, and it was hard to see the moths that indicate a secret because they blend right in with the environment since everything is so, like, muted, and these moths are white and the lighting is just super dark that it was actually impossible to see at times. The split world mechanic in this game was really cool at first, until you realize there's not much point being in it other than for farming, and it's really frustrating for platforming because you can't just move objects from the Umbral world to the real world, so you need to fully phase into Umbral, which takes a few seconds, move a platform, which takes even longer, just to use a totem at the very end of the platform that you just moved to go back to the real world, which takes another few seconds. And that was if you're lucky, because if not, then you have to run around for 20 minutes trying to find the goddamn thing because they put it like 30 miles away, and it's just, oh dude, it's so annoying. There are definitely times where this makes sense, but there are also times where it's just a simple platform that you need to move, and I don't see why you can't just hold the lantern out to move it and walk on it and move it again without fully committing to the Umbral world. Probably the most annoying part of this world, however, is the vestige system, which is Lords of the Fallen's equivalent to bonfires. There really aren't that many vestiges in this game, but instead you have vestige seeds that you can plant in the ground at very specific spots in the map in order to summon a temporary bonfire that stays until you plant the next one. This is a good idea on paper, but when you realize that there are barely any actual vestige locations and the seeds cost a lot and take a bit to grind for is where the idea falls apart. There are also times where you will beat a boss and it will spawn a seed bed for you to plant a seed, you rest at the seed, and you walk 10 feet forward, turn the corner, just to see an actual vestige, which never failed to piss me off every single time. Also, I got a few nitpicks. When you're choosing the vestige that you want to teleport to, it's impossible to tell which one you picked because a lot of them look the exact fucking same, and also they're not in order. So like the first one that you get is at the very bottom of it, the last one that you get is at like the very top, the one that you got at mid game is at like also at the very bottom, but there's another one at the mid game that's at like the very top. It just makes no sense. I don't know why they designed it this way. Another really stupid design decision is that when you kill an enemy in any other Souls game, you get souls, right? It's what it is. It's a Souls-like. You kill them, you get souls. In this game, you still get the souls, but for some reason, it's not automatic. It's manual. You have to manually pick up the souls, which is so fucking stupid because there are enemies in this game that take like 20 seconds for their animation just for them to fall over, where you then have to wait another like 3 or 4 seconds just to pick up their souls. And it's just, I don't get it. I don't get it, man. I don't know if the devs are trying to pad the time or what, but it just got so fucking stupid. It really disappointed me that this game's world is just not fun to play around in because it has a style that I absolutely love, but everything in it is just so rough that I never had a moment where I was like, damn, that was a really fun area. 99% of the time, it was more like, damn, that area sucked. The combat in Souls-likes are usually the make or break for the game. If you have bad combat, there's really no point in playing the game, and I can safely say that Lies of P's combat has one of the most satisfying melee combat systems I have played in a Souls-like game. It plays a bit like a slower Bloodborne mixed with Sekiro and managed to have that polish that you usually only see in FromSoft games that you know and love. Like I just said, in terms of movement and normal combat, it's much more like Bloodborne. Lies of P also has something similar to the parry and the stagger system from Sekiro, and the mix of the two makes an extremely satisfying combination. The way blocking and parrying works in Lies of P is when you normally block and an enemy attacks you, you will take temporary health damage that you can recover by attacking the enemy, somewhat similar to how the health system works in Bloodborne. However, if you tap the block button before an attack, you can perfectly parry, which deals no damage to you and deals a lot of stagger damage to them, similar to how it works in Sekiro. I've gone through New Game Plus 3 now, and being able to fully understand a boss's moveset and being able to perfectly parry all of their attacks while still weaving in light attacks and getting that final charge attack that you needed to stagger them and get rewarded with their health bar getting deleted, it was just too much fun. The other thing that Lies of P nails is the sound design. Every sound effect in this game, from sharpening your weapon, throwing consumables, and especially your attacks and enemy attacks, just sounds amazing, and most importantly, it sounds powerful. I will never get tired of that fatal attack sound effect. Another thing that I don't see many people touch on is how smooth the animation transitions are. Basically, every single attack in this game flows seamlessly between the next, and mixing in heavy attacks also flows perfectly. And also, random gushing moment, but this Korean sword is one of the most satisfying weapons I have ever used. This game's combat system blew me away in the sense that every single thing in it is just so satisfying and super solid. And it's probably my second favorite Souls-like combat, right behind Nioh 2. Lords of the Fallen goes for your more standard, straightforward Dark Souls type of combat, but the difference is it just doesn't have anywhere near the polish that FromSoft has with their games, so the game just ends up feeling very clunky and weightless. The sound effects being lackluster, paired with the speed of the attacks, just creates something that doesn't ever feel good to play. The animations in this game are so fucking slow that even some of the dexterity weapons felt slower than some of the heaviest weapons in Lies of P. Even something as simple as making the animations faster and giving the sound effects more power would feel much better overall. Like, just compare the sound of the parrying between Lies of P and Lords of the Fallen and tell me which one you prefer. The base movement in Lords of the Fallen is probably the fastest I've seen in a Souls-like, which was really nice, once again at first. Running around at light speed was great, and especially made the run back to bosses much better compared to most other Souls-likes, but the problem with this speed, and mainly the dodge roll, was that you will most likely accidentally kill yourself multiple times by running, jumping, or my personal favorite, rolling off a ledge when trying to dodge an attack, because for some reason the game, it moves you like 300 feet when you dodge. It's definitely more of an actual skill issue complaint, but I feel like this happened to me way more in Lords of the Fallen than it has in any other Souls-like, so I gotta bring it up. Although that could also count for the actual like level design, considering like half the game it felt like you were on like the side of a mountain or like floating somewhere, so you could fall off like anywhere. One more thing that I think is a pretty big issue that needs to be patched immediately is how the lock-on camera works. It works similar to other Souls-like games where you click in the right stick and you basically flick it in the direction of the next enemy you want to hit. The problem is, this targeting system is drunk and doesn't know what to lock onto 90% of the time. It will completely skip targets that are between two others, it will unlock randomly, and my personal favorite is when it just simply won't lock on at all during some boss fights, but every time you try to click it, it autofocuses the camera so that you can't see the enemy that you were trying to lock onto hit you with their attack. The combat in this game it's just not cutting it, and especially when compared to actual FromSoft titles and the bigger Souls-like games like Nioh series or Lies of P, it just doesn't hold a candle to them. When you're playing a Souls game, one of the major aspects of each game is the boss fights. These are the moments that these games build towards, and they should be a big moment. A lot of Souls-likes fail to capture the magic that FromSoft has created with their bosses, but there are some games such as the Nioh series that has some amazing boss fights. And just like the Nioh series, Lies of P managed to make bosses as intense, cool, and most importantly fun as FromSoft's bosses. I think I enjoyed fighting every single boss in this game except for maybe one, which was the second Eldest Black Brotherhood fight, which I didn't think was bad by any means, but I think a lot of people would agree is probably the weakest fight in the game, mainly because it's just a reskin of the first fight, but it's more annoying because you have to fight all of them at once. Some of the fights in this game are genuinely amazing, with one being one of my favorite Souls-like bosses of all time, which is the final boss in the game, the Nameless Puppet. Just the whole experience of the fight was amazing, from the actual story reason, the design, and especially the fight itself. Two other standouts which I have to mention are the King of Puppets and the Lexasia fight, both of which are absolutely 10 out of 10s, as well, especially King of Puppets for the story reasons, which makes everything come full circle. One thing about this game is that the bosses are hard, but they are never unfair. Sometimes with these type of games, you will stumble upon bosses that might have some bullshit attacks or mechanics, and how they are designed is just bullshit in general, but I think out of every boss in this game, I encountered maybe one bullshit move, which was the air knockup attack that King of Puppets does, but the actual hitbox was a lot larger than the actual animation of the attack, so it really wasn't too bad when you figured out that you have more than enough time to run out when he does the attack, or you can just easily stagger him when he starts it. Liza P basically had no bad bosses, and most of them were a blast to fight, and they just kept getting better and better and better, which is something that is somewhat rare in a non-FromSoft Souls-like game. Lords of the Fallen, on the other hand, really likes making anti-fun bullshit bosses. I really hope you like additional mobs in your boss fights, because Lords of the Fallen fucking loves that shit. I think 99% of the fights in Lords of the Fallen were really easy, but it just started annoying me how the devs use ads in order to add difficulty to the boss instead of just making the boss itself harder with more moves or stronger attacks. Most of the bosses in this game do very little damage to you, and since almost half the bosses in this game are just mini bosses that just turn into normal mobs when you beat them, they really only do like 2 or 3 attacks that barely hurt, and instead there's a few times where they just use ads to add difficulty, or they have these stupid little ghost things that you have to pull out your lantern to destroy because it gives them like an unbreakable shield that you can't do any damage to them until you break the ghost. And it's just I don't know why you think this is like a fun way to add difficulty. It's just dumb. It's just annoying and dumb. I think out of the around 30 bosses in the game, I really only enjoyed fighting 3 or 4 of them, with the rest being some of the most forgettable bosses I have ever seen in a Souls-like game. And it doesn't help that half of them are fucking mini bosses that just turn into normal mobs. And it really sucks because the designs in this game are, like, some of them are genuinely some of the coolest designs I've seen in a Souls-like game, but the fights are just ass. Like, going back to the bad camera in this game, this camera has no fucking idea what to do when you're fighting a bigger boss with multiple limbs to lock onto, and not only does it mess that up, your actual dodge becomes fucked up too. So for example, when locking onto this boss and simply holding forward and dodging like I want to attack his leg, the game thinks I'm trying to dodge left or right and will put me in spots that I definitely do not want to be in. Instead of fighting the boss, it felt like I was fighting against the game's developers, which made most of the bosses extremely annoying to deal with since they're all way bigger than you. Speaking of bad bosses, the final boss of this game it's a work of art. I am not exaggerating when I say that this boss is the biggest joke of a final boss in any game since Demon's Souls' final boss. The entire fight is just an even shittier version of Deacons of the Deep from Dark Souls 3, and it's even worse because the boss is just constantly rambling and monologuing while you're just aimlessly killing people that barely attack you. The only way that you can even take damage in this fight is because the people that you need to kill constantly have lava puddles under them, so when you kill them and you're like melee and not ranged, you still take damage because they couldn't think of anything else to add difficulty. Like, I don't know, maybe an actual fucking boss for your final fight. The best part of this fight, however, other than the game finally being over and I can move on and uninstall the game, was when you finally beat the boss, if you can even call it that. The game just goes black, and then you get spark notes of what happened in the story. There's no cutscene, there's no actual conclusive ending, just spark notes and roll credits. This game was already 6 feet under, but this was the final nail in the coffin for Lords of the Fallen for me, and I hate being so harsh on this game because I was so hyped for it. And I definitely sound like a broken record with the amount of times I said the game was annoying. But when you drop something like this right next to Liza P, which is an absolute banger in quite literally every way possible, it just makes the issue so much more noticeable. I mean, hell, we just saw this with Starfield and Cyberpunk not too long ago, with Cyberpunk dropping the Phantom Liberty expansion, which was so good that it made Starfield not look good. I don't want Lords of the Fallen to be just like FromSoft games, or Liza P, or Neo. But I think when this game tries to be so much like Dark Souls and adds a ton of things that are just infuriating to deal with, I feel like it just falls apart. I think the devs for Lords of the Fallen have a pretty solid base in that their art team is absolutely incredible, and with some fixes to the combat, the game itself could feel better. But the main thing that they need to fix is to remove all of the bullshit and just bring in the quality of life that other Souls games have, because right now there is none. Right now, Liza P is probably the most quality of life design choices that make it one of the most accessible Souls-like games alongside Elden Ring, despite it easily being one of the hardest. Yet Lords of the Fallen is one of the easiest, but has no quality of life features and is way more annoying to play and deal with, and I believe that it will push a lot more people away. I think some people will enjoy this game more than I did, but it's just one of those games that went very against what I find fun in games, and it just felt way more annoying than it ever felt fun. So if I were to rate the game, I would give it at most a 5 out of 10. On the other hand, Lies of P is such a fantastic game, and I gotta gush about it some more. This game managed to knock Nioh 2 off of my favorite non-From Souls game, and not only that, it managed to fit itself into my personal top 3 favorite Souls games alongside Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. Lies of P is seriously a masterpiece, and even though I've already gotten every single achievement in the game, I still want to do more runs, which I've never wanted to do for any game in this genre other than the others in my top 3. Everything about this game, from its combat, its world, its bosses, and even its optimization and polish is so incredible. And I didn't even talk about this, but this might be the most optimized game I have played in the last like five years, which is super sad coming from a first-time developer, since most other Souls-likes and even From's games have terrible PC ports. And with that said, I'm giving Lies of P a 10 out of 10. This game is such a banger, and we are definitely getting more Lies of P since that after credit scene dropped a fucking bombshell of a teaser of what's to come, and I cannot wait for what the future of this series looks like.